during what is probably one of the most vulnerable times in a woman's life, during this postpartum period where she is dealing with things she's probably never had to deal with before, if during that time there is a lack of support, the expectation and norm becomes mom does not get support.
Welcome to the Sparkle Project. I'm Emily, a divorced mom of two on my own journey to shine a little brighter. This podcast is here to help you protect your sparkle amidst the chaos and impossible expectations of modern motherhood. If you're a mom ready to choose yourself and shine, you are in the right place. Let's dive in.
Hey, welcome back to the Sparkle Project. I am so happy you are here taking this time for you listening to this episode. Just a reminder before we fully get into things, if you are not already subscribed to the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you subscribe. You'll get a notification or have the episode in your queue of episodes that you listen to weekly. It makes it easy to not forget to listen if this is something you want to be listening to every week. A huge reason that I started this podcast in the first place and have kept it going as long as I have is because I truly believe there are not enough spaces where we are talking about some of the kind of hidden realities of motherhood. That if we're not acknowledging that there are just some truths about the experience of being a mom that are somewhat universal, if we're not bringing awareness to the fact that other moms are also experiencing those things, it can feel deeply isolating and unnecessarily so, right? When we're having a struggle that many other moms can relate to, but we're not talking about it and we feel completely alone in our experience. And of course, there's the shame that comes along with that. It's just like a recipe for a bad time. And because, again, so many of these experiences are universal, I think that when we talk about it, when we point out the fact that, okay, other moms might be having a hard time, or other moms are really trying to figure out who they are in the context of motherhood. They may not have it all figured out either. Just having that conversation can be extremely validating. It can give us a little bit of a pressure release to feel like, okay, me focusing on myself and prioritizing my own self-connection makes sense right now. And it doesn't have to look any certain way. I don't have to feel bad that is a journey I'm on and that I don't have it figured out, because realistically, so many other moms don't either. And so in a nutshell, that is why the Sparkle Project exists. That is why I'm having conversations here every single week, oftentimes with other incredible mothers, practitioners, people who support moms. It's really about normalizing the experiences we go through as mothers that oftentimes feel shameful when we don't recognize that it's kind of a normal experience. Having said that, I am also quite tuned into the conversations happening in the greater societal context about motherhood. And right now, I'm recording this episode on August 9th. We are, as a society, as a collective, watching Lindsay Clancy's trial happening right now. And we're not going to get into that in this episode really at all. But there is a conversation that's been coming along with that about the lack of support in the postpartum period. And when I say the postpartum period, I'm not talking specifically about some number of months. I'm really just talking about the experience. You become a mom and you go through this period of intense change. And that can be just normal changes, but they are changes that impact you. It can also be mental health conditions, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. There's so much that can come along with that experience of becoming a mom. And what I'm seeing a lot of right now in the online space is a lot of moms just expressing how in their own postpartum experiences, they were not taken care of to the extent that they needed to be. Their, whatever they were facing wasn't acknowledged in the way that was the most beneficial to them. There is lack across the board. And that goes for people who struggled severely, but it also goes for people who maybe didn't. And people who maybe had a decent amount of support. There still are areas where that was lacking. And so today, I want to talk about how that early lack of support in motherhood translates to struggles with really prioritizing ourselves as our kids get older and feeling disconnected from ourselves, feeling disconnected from who we are. Because the lack of support in the postpartum period doesn't just affect us then. It doesn't just affect how we're able to recover from postpartum mental health challenges. It doesn't just affect how we are physically able to recover. It also affects how we then become moms in a greater sense as we go along this journey of, okay, now I'm raising a 5-year-old. Okay, now my kid is 7. Now my kid's 10. And that like lack of support and that normalization of the lack of support that happened so early on when we needed it most, it does carry with us into those other stages of motherhood. And that is what I want to look at specifically today, what I want to talk about. The reason I want to talk about this is because if we can recognize where patterns of martyrdom might come from, or why we might feel so disconnected from ourselves in the first place after becoming a mom, there is more self-compassion that we can have for ourselves, and also more of an understanding of how maybe to address breaking patterns of martyrdom or address reconnecting with ourselves. Of course, lack of postpartum support is not the only factor that contributes to, becoming somebody who is self-sacrificing for our kids and has a hard time getting out of that mode. But it is one factor that I do believe is quite big and, again, quite universal. This is something that I think across the board, we see moms not having the level of support that would most benefit them. Again, even when you are in a position where you can afford access to like therapy and to pelvic floor physical therapy and having support with the children and being able to get enough sleep and, all the things, even still, a lot of times there is just an expectation that moms will carry the load, will be able to do it and do it well. And so any like straying from that, there can be shame that comes along with it. And there is just a lot of room for improvement in how systematically we take care of moms in those early phases, in those first few months and first few years really of motherhood. So let's talk explicitly about what postpartum support in our culture looks like. Leading up to giving birth, there are a lot of appointments that we have, right? You are being checked regularly by doctors. There is all kinds of information on like supplements to take to make sure that you are in the best health to provide for your baby. Towards the end of pregnancy, you're being seen weekly. If you have, something that's going on that is an additional concern, you're able to get in quickly to see a doctor. Of course, depending on where you are, the access to that kind of care may look different. However, it's just kind of generally accepted that there is a level of care for every mother before having the baby. Many moms are also able to attend classes through their hospital or through the community and read books, connect with maybe other moms who are pregnant. There are resources available more so prior to giving birth than there are after. After we give birth, it looks a lot different. I think you'd be hard pressed to find people who would say that moms get enough attention, medically even, in that just after birth period. I know for me, it was a 6-week checkup. That's what I got. I was screened for whatever needed to be screened for there. With one birth, they checked that my stitches were healing up fine, and like that was it. Oh, you get cleared for being able to have sex again, right? Like that's what we think of when you think of that 6-week appointment. The baby, of course, has a lot more appointments. It's like your checkups shortly after birth, 1-week checkup. There's all kinds of access to that care still with a newborn. You're able to kind of reach out to your pediatrician and figure that out. There are vaccination appointments and just a lot of access to care for the baby. But it's not just our medical system that is lacking in supporting postpartum moms. There are so many other factors of just limited support that happens that contribute to patterns of moms feeling like they have to handle it themselves. A lot of women have experience with people asking, how's the baby? How can I help? And they just want to help with the baby. And all of these kinds of things that perpetuate this idea that the baby is important and my care doesn't really matter. When we have leave policies where maybe mom gets time off, which even saying that, like we know that that's not necessarily a given, but a lot of times dads don't get time off. And so maybe they have a few days and then mom is right back to like caring for the baby, being the sole provider for the baby because she has some leave while also caring for her own body, dealing with whatever like weird symptoms we have because we know that there's a lot, right? Figuring out how to manage like the chapped nipples and the leaky boobs and the like figuring out how to get a shower in. Also, maybe dealing with baby blues. I know for me, after the birth of my first son, I would just break down crying all the time. And that was like my body kind of reorienting itself to a different level of hormones. Like it felt very much out of my control that I would just start crying. With my second son, I had more severe postpartum mental health things, and was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety. And I had to continue raising my toddler and being with this newborn baby, being completely overstimulated while dealing with postpartum anxiety. And my partner at the time, he went back to work. And for me, while I did have family support in the area, I did have friends who could show up for me, it's not always enough. There is this expectation that as the mom, I'll just handle it. My birth went smoothly. I wasn't recovering from anything crazy. It's my job, right? This is what I'm doing, and I did it once, so I can do it again, right? Some people don't have that village. So really, there's not even anyone to ask for help. Maybe it's just dad. That's the only other person. And maybe not. Maybe you're a single mom and you're doing it all on your own. And our communities, for the most part, are not set up to give us like real, true care during that time, real, true community during that time. And so what it comes down to is that during what is probably one of the most vulnerable times in a woman's life, during this postpartum period where she is dealing with things she's probably never had to deal with before, physical health, mental health, all these added responsibilities, the lack of sleep that comes along with just having a newborn. Inevitably, we're just running on not enough sleep, straight up not enough sleep. If during that time there is a lack of support, the expectation and norm becomes mom does not get support. Mom doesn't really matter, right? And it's hard not to take that in and make it mean something, even if totally subconsciously. We're taking that in and understanding, okay, the norm is for me not to be fully taken care of. And that is the connection I want us all to make here today. I want us to understand how the systemic nature of the lack of support contributes to us continuing in motherhood, expecting that we are not worthy of that support, or it's just not something we have access to. It's not something society deems that we need. And so if we do at some point feel like we need more support, there is shame that comes along with that because I should be able to do this, right? Like society expects me to, which means I probably should be able to. No, that's not what that means, but that's how it can feel. And for many moms, it looks like developing this sense of like, I must sacrifice for my kids. I am supposed to sacrifice myself. And we can get into these real strong patterns of martyrdom, of I am putting my kids first at the expense of myself. But that's what it looks like to be a good mom. That's what it looks like to be doing this role that I did sign up for, I guess, right? I didn't realize this is what it would be, but early postpartum taught me that that actually is what this is. So yeah, it's normal for me to kind of forget about my needs, put everybody else first, and just suck it up and get on with it. And when that is how we are handling motherhood, when we are not prioritizing ourselves, when we are not focusing on what we need as individuals, there is this incredible disconnection that can happen. So many moms describe the sensation of like feeling like they've lost themselves in motherhood, feeling like they don't even know who they are anymore. And I believe that the lack of support in postpartum contributes heavily to that because we kind of learn not to check in with ourselves. We learn not to ask ourselves what we need. We learn not to express to other people that we have needs because, again, society tells us, well, you should just be able to handle it. And we end up disconnected from our values. We end up disconnected from the things that make us feel fulfilled, the things that make us feel like we know who we are and we are secure in that. It also can lead to us feeling disconnected from the people around us. Like we don't believe that the people around us show up for us or can show up for us in the way we need, even within a relationship. When the norm is that mom will handle it, if there's a dad involved and he's not giving the level of support that would have been most beneficial, right? For whatever number of reasons, whether it's because the norms of the household kind of lie on gender norms that are kind of gender roles that are normative and mom takes care of things. Or maybe it's dad had to go back to work right away and couldn't be there in a way that was really great because like there wasn't the access to that opportunity. Of course, that can lead to disconnection from a partner, from your family, because they didn't show up the way that would have been the most beneficial. But you also kind of were trained into not asking. You were trained into just knowing that like you were supposed to handle it. It sets us up for having a really hard time when we figure out, okay, I need to focus on my own needs. Like that actually is important. That matters, right? Like that's what we talk about so much here on this podcast is like recognizing, okay, I do matter when I do prioritize myself, when I am more fulfilled because I'm doing things that bring me joy. I'm showing up in motherhood in a way that is actually more beneficial to my kids too, right? Like I'm modeling some really good things, self-compassion, self-love, following your dreams. I'm modeling that for my kids. That's good. But if you've accepted that and you're in a place of wanting to reconnect with yourself, wanting to figure out what steps do I take to prioritize myself? Well, there is a lot of unlearning that has to be done, a lot of releasing of these patterns of martyrdom that are happening. And, you know, maybe overcoming the shame of asking for help, overcoming the shame of taking time away from your kids, right? We develop mom guilt that comes along with these things because we're kind of breaking out of what is the norm, what we, quote, should be able to handle, right? And figuring out how to kind of bust free of those shoulds can feel really, really, really hard. And the point here is that it's hard because that initial lack of support really ingrained those patterns of not focusing on ourselves, not feeling like we are worthy of focusing on ourselves because in the most vulnerable time, we weren't worthy of that. That awareness is important in being able to take those next steps towards reconnection, towards actually being able to look inward and take the time you need to do that. So if you are a mom who is on a journey of reconnection, who is on a journey of developing a stronger sense of self and stepping into a more fulfilling version of life and motherhood, if that is you, and if you are struggling to break some of these patterns along the way, I hope that this episode maybe brought a little bit more context to why you may be struggling in the first place, and a little bit of awareness to just the factors and the longevity of, you know, kind of developing those patterns in the first place. So if it's hard to break out of those patterns, well, yeah, you developed them over time, right? And no matter where you are in your motherhood journey, whether you are postpartum, you had a baby recently, or you are years down the road and kind of reckoning with, okay, I'm ready for a change. I'm ready for something different. I'm ready to feel more like myself right now. Understanding this one piece of the puzzle can be really helpful in actually stepping towards change. I'm going to leave this episode there today, and I appreciate you being here. If you are enjoying these episodes and would love to support the show, I would so appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Let me know what the show is bringing to your life. Let other moms know how this podcast may help them along the way. Also, if this episode was kind of enlightening in any way, please go ahead and share it with another mom in your life. We all have had a postpartum period, and I do believe that the vast majority of us did not get the support that we really could have used during that time. And so I think this is something we all need to be aware of. We need to be having this conversation. I am grateful that I'm seeing more of this conversation right now in a broader societal context because it's an important one. So with that, I'll see you next week with another guest episode. Keep on shining.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Sparkle Project. Loved what you heard? Share this episode with a friend, and don't forget to leave a rating and review to show your support for the show. We'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.